Today I will explain the movie called Bound to Vengeance from 2015. The story of this film is very alluring. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care, and I hope you enjoy it. At the start of the film, we see a videotape where there's a girl named Eve with her boyfriend Roni recording her. Eve was happy and loved her boyfriend Roni immensely. Then we see a truck going towards the desert. A man comes out of the truck, goes inside a house, and cooks a meal. After that, he goes to the basement. We see a girl tied in the basement, and it was none other than Eve. The man tells Eve he has brought food for her. Eve doesn't reply anything to the man. She keeps a brick hidden underneath and strikes the person with it. She smashes his head, takes the key to the lock, and frees herself. She then goes on to tying the man with the chains so he can't escape. She goes out of the house and finds herself in the desert, stranded. She tries to flee using the van, but doesn't find the key since it was with the man who originally came to feed her. So eventually, she goes inside the room and searches. She finds a gun with many bullets, which she keeps with herself. Eve finds photos of other girls whom she thought were victims of the man. When she saw the photo of a girl named Dylan, she remembered something. Dylan was her in the basement, but she couldn't remember correctly. She took a bath and got changed, and took a solemn resolve to free the other girls from the kidnapper. She went to the basement with a gun, pointed it at the kidnapper, and asked where the other girls were. He told her he won't say anything. Then Eve fires a shot at him. It frightens the kidnapper. He tells Eve if she promises to take him to the hospital, he'll tell her where the other girls are. Eve promises him, but he tells the girls they are at different locations, so he has to go out. Hearing this, Eve goes to the upper floor, makes a loop through rope and asks the kidnapper to wear it around his neck, and if he tries to act smart, she'll pull the rope and hang him. Eve takes him to the van and asks him to drive. He takes Eve to the first house. Eve ties the hoop to a tree and goes to untie the first girl. The girl was very afraid. She became mad staying there. After opening her up, the girl started screaming frantically. Eve tries to make her understand she had come here to save her, but she doesn't listen to anything and goes out to flee, where her legs get tangled in a scramble of things, and she falls on a pointed metal arrow and dies. Eve was sad seeing that, as she couldn't save the girl. Then she takes the kidnapper out and asks him to take her to the second victim. He takes her to a building and says the second one is inside the house. She takes the kidnapper inside and finds the second victim bounded by chains. The kidnapper opens her up and slowly tells her Eve wants to take her spot. The girls get livid and attack Eve. She tells Eve nobody can take her place. Then, without a choice, Eve takes her gun and shoots the girl dead. Eve sees the kidnapper had freed himself. She shoots him in the leg and attacks him with a wooden block. Eve had some flashbacks where she saw the girl with her in the basement. She takes the kidnapper in the car and taped his hands so he couldn't escape. He asks Eve to hand him over to the police, but she tells that some girls are still remaining and asks him to take her to them. The kidnapper tried to blackmail her emotionally, but she didn't listen to him. He tells her her boyfriend Roni tried his best to find her. She asks, how did he know Roni? He replies, he had watched Roni on TV. Eve remembers the time spent with Roni. Eve goes to the next house and enters, finds another girl bounded by chains. She frees her when two men walk into the room. Eve remembers these two men had come to her in the basement too and exploited her. This made her furious, and she uses the gun to kill both of them. Then she helps the girl and takes her out. Both of them sit in the van, but the van wasn't starting. Eve became angry. Then she had flashbacks about the girls who were with her in the basement. The girl who was freed, her name was Leah. Eve takes Leah to the van, and Leah says this was the kidnapper who had kidnapped her. Eve asks her where the other girls are. The kidnapper drives her to an old building. Eve takes Leah and finds many other girls there. Eve asks them how did they end up there. They tell Eve they've been kidnapped and brought here. Now they'll be sold off. Eve felt they're not alone there. Leah goes back to see if the kidnapper had freed himself. He had freed himself, and called someone from the phone lying in the van. Eve tells Leah to stay with the girls and call the police. Eve comes and sees the kidnapper is not in the van. Then the kidnapper comes out from the front seat and distracts Eve. A big guy comes from behind and knocks Leah. This is the guy who had kidnapped Leah. They were about to kill Eve when Leah comes from behind and kills the man with a hammer, then points the gun at the kidnapper, and she lets Eve go. Eve then uses the hammer and breaks the kidnapper's leg, and then both of them tie the kidnapper and ask him where the last girl is. The kidnapper tells where the last girl is, so Leah and Eve start for the last destination. The phone of the kidnapper rings, and Eve receives it. It was a voice message. It was his wife who said, "Phil, bring vegetables while coming back, and your daughter is waiting for you." Eve gets to know the name of the kidnapper is Phil, and he has a family. She goes to the last house, and entering, she sees Roni was lying down. Roni was very happy seeing Eve, and wanted to hug her, but Eve was suspicious of him, and points the gun and asks what was he doing there. He said he had changed his house, and he loved her very much. Eve lets her gun down, but at that moment, a voice of a girl is heard from the rock inside, and Eve becomes cautious. She remembers the photographs she saw, and Roni was with each of the girls. She suspiciously asks Roni to open the door. Roni opens the door, and Eve finds the last girl. Eve figures out all of them were involved, and they ran a racket of selling girls. She shoots and kills Roni. Phil untied himself and was trying to flee, but he couldn't as the van wasn't starting. Eve came out and shot Phil. Leah, meanwhile, called the police. Phil asks Leah, since his work is done, take him to the hospital, but Leah says one work is still left. We see in flashback, Eve had known Phil's address from Roni. Eve shows Phil the address. He requests Eve not to go there, but Eve doesn't listen to him. Eve remembers the girl whom he had seen outside the basement too, but couldn't remember. Eve throws Phil at the door of his house. His wife bursts out crying, seeing him in that condition. Eve spared Phil's life, thinking he had a family. She then remembered it was her sister who was in the basement with her, and she has been exploited and killed. After this, she goes to Phil's house, cause her revenge wasn't over. Phil's daughter opens the door, and Eve stops her, and the movie ends here.